you up. Okay. Uh, oh, okay. Yes. Is there a question from the prior class?
Oh,
Material. It could be general question too, whatever it is. Go ahead.
um, so before I've learned this meditation, and I was like, I'm not sure if I made this up or not, but it was like going through the five aggregates and thinking that each one is impermanent, of the nature of suffering, lacks the quality of being a self, and lacks the quality of being experienced by itself,
Mm.
which seems to be like the four aspects of the first noble truth. Is what the meditation that is being referred to that we just learned about?
Mhm. Well, that was one of the ones, right? Remember, we had the, I'll just show the text again. So it was talking about purifying meditation, the objects of meditation for purifying the afflictions. And we talked about the general and then, sorry, the, right, the general and specific. And within the general, there was two kinds, right? Those that purify the afflictions temporarily or suppress them, and then one that purifies from the root.
Right.
So I think that's where it came up. Did I remember exactly where this one? Okay, so here, um, here, yeah, yeah, that's where it came up. So, okay, so purifying afflictions has these two, right? Merely reducing the strength or utterly eradicating the seeds. So the first is this one where you are more or less meditating to achieve a very deep state of concentration called jhana. And there are many different levels of that. And that is merely reducing the strength of the seeds of the afflictions because it's not wisdom, it's deep concentration. So it's wonderful meditation. But it's not wisdom. And wisdom is the only thing that can counteract ignorance. Right? Knowing counteracts unknowing or misknowing. So what does it mean for knowing here? As it says in the latter case, the objects of meditation are impermanence and the other of the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. When you use these as objects of meditation for cultivating serenity, you do not analyze, but instead keep your attention on any one cognition of an aspect of those objects that appears to it. Okay, so that's um, you know, what it says there. And then below, it says, like here it says, you observe the aggregates. And then, like, so how do you stabilize your mind on such things as the aggregate? Things such as the aggregates, right? Going down. Right. So you observe them, keep your attention on them. Well, that's the aggregates. That doesn't talk about the 16 attributes. So I would just say that the 16 attributes, you don't have to do it with respect to the aggregates. You can do it with respect to any objects that are characterized. Like you wouldn't meditate on all 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths with respect to the aggregates, because only right true suffering applies to the aggregates. The aggregates are an instance of true suffering, but the aggregates are not true origin, true cessations, or true paths, right? At least not all of the aggregates. There are some aggregates which are. So you would have to just understand first what are examples or illustrations of each of the Four Noble Truths. What is something that is true self, something that is true origin, something that is true cessation, something that is true path, and then meditate on those four attributes. But the way in relation to the first noble truth, the true sufferings, yes, that would be fine. So you could meditate on the aggregates as being suffering, impermanent, and self, not being a self and not being an object experience of self. Is that too much, or did that did that go in too many different directions, or does that answer? I'm just trying to connect it back to the text that we had gone through so that everyone kind of sees what you're referring to, and but I'm not sure if I made it more complicated or what. What do you think?
That makes sense. Going back to like, I guess this discussion we keep having about like what it means to keep your attention with the one cognition, right? Like using this as an example, like does that, for instance, mean like I'm looking at the form aggregate, like my body, and one aspect of like the of the four aspects of the First Noble Truth is its impermanence. So I would be focusing just on the impermanence of my body is one way of doing it. But it also seems like another way of doing it that we've talked about is like having, like, for instance, a sense of all the aggregates and how all the aggregates are impermanent all at once. Or,
Right, you could do that. That's just more difficult. Again, what you're talking about is bringing up the question of in real meditation practice, and when you go and sit down, you try to really grapple with these teachings and do what Tsongkhapa is saying, what these other masters are saying, then your mind will sort of switch between analytical meditation and stabilizing meditation, right? Between insight and serenity. And the important thing is just to understand or recognize when it's doing which and to sort of consciously do that. So yeah, you're gonna be doing what you're talking about is like, how do you get it to be stabilizing meditation when the topic or the thing you're meditating on is so complex or so has so many different aspects, and there's there are five aggregates and can do it all, meditate on all of it at once, and then there's the four attributes, the impermanence, the selflessness, the suffering. How can you focus on just a single, just have one cognition of a single attribute? Well, you have to have first a very clear understanding of all those things, of whichever thing you want to take as the object of a shamatha. So then that means like building up a bunch of analytical meditation first. A good habit of analytical meditation on those things. And including just learning about them, just studying about them. And if you if you have the opportunity to do what the Tibetan tradition really excels in is the debate practice, which is a form of analytical meditation that really helps to get clear on those things. So then you'll just sort of understand, okay, this is impermanence of a form aggregate, this is impermanence of a feeling aggregate, this is a subject aggregate. You can hold them all together in one cognition and see them all as the impermanence aspect of it, and then just focus them on single point of view on it. But that's it. I would say, from my perspective, a very advanced meditation. Like I can't do that. I could maybe hold my mind on just impermanence of one thing, but not all five aggregates at once, especially because like the form aggregate and the other four are like one's matter and the other one's the bodies, right? The form aggregate and the others are types of consciousness. Like I don't even know how to think about those two at the same time at all, So my understanding is not clear enough to do that. And so, I mean, yeah, that I'm in any sense, advanced. So that's what I'm saying is that that's an advanced practice, right? But to do an analytical meditation on impermanence of something, your body, or your breath, or the objects around you, right? The TV in front of you, the house, building here, or could be feeling, right? Consciousness, kind of consciousness. Anyway, understanding, meditating on the impermanence, or sound, of course, is the classic example. Sound is used in the logic and debate. practice. So you can meditate on impermanence of sound or light or anything. Anyway, just understanding that, focusing the mind on it, and then gradually kind of as your understanding grows, then you can expand it into these different Tsongkhapa is so funny the approach because as we go through the text and next the coming sections, it's sort of like I think it will answer actually a lot of the questions that have been coming up. It's almost a little bit backwards the way that Tibetan texts are written often. Uh, is like instead of like giving an overview at the outset and saying we're gonna, in the next chapter we're gonna talk about this, that, and that. This is the introduction. It like gives the more detailed, difficult, explanation first, and then goes back and like zooms out and gives an overview. And so there are some, I think, there'll be some clarifying points that come up in the next few sections. Yeah. Anything else? Shall we go back into it? Okay. Screen share. Okay. So we're at this section of this, basically a debate that's being brought up at Tsongkhapa and referencing a view that is genuinely held not only by people in Tsongkhapa's time, but still today. Okay. There are those who suppose that if you focus on an object of meditation and keep your attention on it, this is an apprehension of signs. They claim that meditation on emptiness means just stabilizing your mind without any bias, without any basis, without focusing on any object of meditation. This is a total misunderstanding of how to meditate on emptiness. Okay, so again, stabilizing your mind without any basis. So here, basically, the basis really just means an object here, right? Something that is like there as the like central thing of your meditation, something holding it together, a basis of the meditation. So it's saying without a basis, without an object, without focusing on any. Okay, now, yeah, then there are even other ways of talking about this that might not use the exact same phrasing, that might not say an apprehension of signs, that particular phrase, but still promote the style of meditation, right? And I would just make the small one, maybe allow for the possibility that yes, it actually could be a part, this style of meditation or something very much like it could be a part of a wider, part of a practice that develops into something that could, or it could be a step leading towards a meditation on emptiness. But if someone says that this itself is meditation on emptiness, then that's what Tsongkhapa is saying is an error. Or frankly, that even, if you even say that it's, I guess, literally possible, that's kind of an error. I mean, that's the point Tsongkhapa is making, that Jonathan made a nice comment on last week is, I mean, if your mind's doing anything, there's an experience there's something being experienced, right? So to even say that it's possible is a bit of, to think it's literally possible isn't. Yeah. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah. Losong, what's the thought on, say, non-dual cognition or non-dual awareness?
Hmm.
Is this something that's, say, a part of Tsongkhapa's thinking on this subject? Is this more terminology that gets used in other schools of Tibetan
Well,
Buddhism?
well, I would say that that's probably one of the terms that does sometimes come into an explanation of meditation, something like this. People could call that non-dual or, bare awareness or bare attention, and all sorts of terms come up, right? Um, so yes, but the answer to your actual question, I just wanted to point that out. The answer to your question there, yes, Tsongkhapa very much talks about non-dual. I mean you know, what's up? Shut up. So one phrase that is used very frequently is the exalted wisdom. What's up? Exalted wisdom that is non-conceptual. And then usually when we talk about non-duality, we talk about a mind which has, I think I mentioned actually just when we were discussing in private, is a mind which has duality, for which duality has vanished or settled. Set is really the best word to use because it's the same word to talk about the sun setting. So where the duality has dissolved or set over the horizon, right? The duality has faded away. Okay, so that's a common phrase. The phrase non-dual, yeah, that absolutely comes up. Yeah, so that's in some copies, right? But the meaning might be a little different. Now, the meaning is different again depending on which philosophical school you're coming from too, and that's one of the areas of sort of where there can be some uh, confusion or where things get a little muddied is because different Tibetan schools are more or less influenced. Different of the Tibetan masters from the different lineages, the four lineages, are influenced more or less from different philosophical schools of the ancient Indian masters, meaning the four, right? Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka, which again in English, the Great Exposition School, the Sutra School, the Mind Only School, and the Middle Way School. So because those four all are brought into Tibet, different Tibetan masters are more heavily or less heavily influenced by, different things from those schools. That goes on. That then leads to the way they sort of talk about, what their take on the ultimate view is, and then you get different meanings of non-duality, because especially those last two, Chittamatra and Madhyamaka, Mind Only Middle Way School, they both talk a lot about non-duality, but with very different meanings. So anyway, yeah, be happy to go into that more at some point if you like, or you could wait till we get to the section on insight and see what comes up.
I like that question here that Lama Tsongkhapa is saying whatever meditation you do is necessarily dualistic, in that there's an object of consciousness and the consciousness meditating on that object. So seems like even a meditation on emptiness would seem to fall into that category of a dualistic meditation in that way.
Exactly. Very good point. So what we're doing here is we're seeing that there is a difference between the perspective of the yogi in meditation, in meditative equipoise, and the perspective of what either the yogi themselves post meditation or someone else, a third person observer, kind of describing what they're doing, what they're meditating on, right? So from the perspective of the yogi in meditative equipoise on emptiness, there is no distinction between subject and object, right? It's like water being poured into water, right? And you just have a big tub or a pool or an ocean and you pour water. Well, where does that water go? Can you, the water you pour in, can you see it? No, it just merges in with the body of water, right? So it's like that. The object emptiness and the mind, the wisdom realizing emptiness are like merged. There is no distinction from the perspective of the yogi. But after they come out of meditation and someone asks them, what were you meditating on? They could say, oh, I was meditating on emptiness, right? like, they can describe for you that, or someone else, again, like looking at that situation can say, oh, there's a person sitting there. They have a mind, they have a body. They're focused on emptiness. Does that make sense? And so I think that maybe some of the scholars or masters don't make that distinction so explicit, and so it's that again is something that kind of muddies it. But if you just have that, right, if you recognize that at the beginning and then you go and listen to their different explanations or hear how they talk about non-duality, it might help to make more sense out of it. Yeah.
Those
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
just to point a little bit long, because I don't know, this like something that occurred to me thinking about how to balance these two. Like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but perhaps one way of thinking about it is that it's not that non-duality is not that there are no subjects and no objects, but there's no hard distinction between the two. So objects can appear, right, to a non-dual cognition, but it's just that those objects don't appear as distinct from the subject, right? So in this, there can still be an object of meditation, right? It's
Yeah.
it's
Right, that's a good way to say it. And that's one of the meanings of non-duality, but not the only. So, great, good way to say it. I mean, in another sense, dual can mean any appearance of conventional truths at all, in as much as when there's an appearance of a conventional truth, you have that and not that, right? You have a cup and things that aren't cups, and you have a mind and things that aren't, right? Whereas in meditation on emptiness, right, your direct perception will be, right? That's why I keep saying meditative equipoise. That implies that there's a direct perception of emptiness. Although technically speaking, not all meditative equipoises about emptiness are direct perceptions, but that's a too technical for how. But anyway, in that direct perception, the emptiness of all objects is perceived direct simultaneously, and there's no sense of that, not that, right? It's literally just emptiness. So another meaning of non-dual is so one meaning is subject-object duality having faded. Another is conventional truth, ultimate truth duality having faded, or conventional truth and other, any appearance of conventional truths having faded.
Hey, I have a comment.
Okay. Yeah, go on. Go ahead.
My picture here. Yeah, I mean I'm going back to. Can you define the way that different schools talk about non-duality? Because it seems to me that non-duality is the same thing. I mean, non-dual means. I mean, I hark back to the Nyingma school where they talk about the three statements of Garib Dorji. You must have heard of those, right? The three statements of Garib Dorji.
I'm not familiar, but please do, you can say them. I'm
Well,
not really not that familiar with the Nyingma stuff.
Nyingma, which is the oldest, I'm sure you know it's the oldest school of Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhism anyway. That they say that the Garib Dorji was one of their, I guess around, like maybe the 8th century or something like that, 9th century is one of their main gurus. Of course, the other one was Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava was another, major teacher in the Nyingma school, and he supposedly wrote. And then the other one was what's his name, Longchenpa, or Longchenpa.
Yeah, Longchenpa.
Yeah. So these, he was the guy that supposedly discovered the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is supposedly written by Padmasambhava. Anyway, in terms of his, their thinking, Garib Dorji is the three statements of Garib Dorji, which Longchenpa wrote a whole book about that, and they state that number one, you're introduced to the ground, what they call it, which is basically the state of non-duality. Two, you allow you consider that the most important, influence in your life, what comes from the ground or comes from meditation, and then this will, lead to enlightenment. So basically, but I mean, the point is that non-dual means that that you disappear, basically, that the you disappears. You don't have any distinction between you and let's say the ground, what they call the ground, which is I mean it's kind of like in other words, it's a state where you as an individual or an individual self don't exist. An individual, you're just part of the overall consciousness that exists.
Well, I would say,
how can there be distinctions between Madhyamaka school, I mean, there may be
Yeah.
different goal, but if you disappear, I mean, basically,
Hmm.
I mean, I would, you know, put it, you're here to disappear, basically, which is, you know,
I
enlightenment
like
has,
that. You're here to disappear. Good, good.
enlightenment has something to do with
So,
that.
so I think that's a great question, and unfortunately, I'm just not that well informed on the Numa's teachings and their way of using vocabulary terms, and you know that's relevant to your question. I think I would feel comfortable making a general point about differences in approach, which come in the form of generalizations or just kind of tendencies of the different Tibetan lineages, where the Gelugpa has a tendency, right? And the Nyingma has a tendency. It doesn't mean every person in those traditions or every scholar, even every, you know, well-known author, but tendencies. The Gelugpa's tendency is to have a bit of a kind of descriptive, more, I would call it scientific, just for ease of, you know, understanding, like just a scientific description of what is occurring in meditation, you know, again, kind of from a third person observer perspective, where they are able to identify different types of minds, right? Different components of the minds that are operating, label them in a specific way using a specific taxonomy or system of, you know, uh, types of consciousness, and then sort of paint the picture that way. Nyingma and even Kagyu, even similarly have almost what I would call a more poetic way of going about using language. So that's just one point. So in other words, like whereas the Gelugpa would try to identify every kind of component going on in the consciousness of a person meditating on emptiness and describe it in that way, this explanation like you're talking about of the 3 points of God Dorje, uh, you know, and identifying the ground and just sort of having yourself disappear, it's a little bit there's a little bit less specificity, even though it's clearly coming from an experiential point of view, right? A point of view of almost poetic experience. Like this is a profound meditation, and this is a way to describe it to get other people to have a similar experience, but with not necessarily a scientific, I would say. Then the question of the different schools, you know, meaning the different four philosophical schools that come from India, that the Tibetans took from India. There, it would take quite a lot of time to really go into detail, but just to give a very brief overview, the Chittamatra's view is that there's no external reality. So when they say non-duality, they're saying the uh, the emptiness or the absence of a different of a distinct nature between an external form, you know, external matter and the consciousness perceiving it. For instance, and a chair and the eye consciousness seeing the chair, right? The absence of a distinct nature between that chair and the eye, the perception of it, you could say, that is non-duality for Chittamatra. For the Madhyamaka, it's more about, like I said, was saying before, sort of like the dissolving in the meditative equipoise on emptiness, the dissolving of a sense of subject and object, and the dissolving of conceptual appearance, and the dissolving of conventional appearances. So that's more of how the Madhyamikas look at non-duality. It's a little bit different from the Chittamatras. And when you talk about self disappearing, again, I would say kind of from the Gelugpa perspective, that means you're having a wisdom realizing selflessness. That would be a different way to phrase that, right? The wisdom realizing selflessness is seeing that there's no intrinsic self anywhere in the aggregates or apart from the aggregates or owning the aggregates. Okay, I hope that makes some sense.
Was Nagarjuna considered, is he considered a Geluk? Geluk? Galupa?
Not at all, because the Gelugpa only started with Tsongkhapa in the 14th century. Nagarjuna was from the 2nd century. He was Indian, right? So none of the Indians are considered, you know, I mean, he's considered a source, right, for all 4 Tibetan lineages. They all consider him a reliable source, his text, right? Mhm. But he's not, he's considered a Madhyamaka. He's the founder of the Madhyamaka school, but not a Gelugpa.
But I mean, the four, the other four traditions are all considered like Nyingma, Kagu, and what's the other one? Sakya,
Sakya.
and the Galupas. That's all Tibetan. They're all Tibetan
Yeah,
schools.
that's right, right, right. And as you said, Nyingma's the oldest, then there was Kagyu, and Sakya, and the Kadampa tradition sort of fed into all four of those.
All right, so just one more question, and then I won't. So what is considered the main, like for example in the Zen tradition, another which came through China, that the main sutras for them are the Diamond Sutra and the Lotus Sutra and maybe the Lavankata Sutra. Those three sutras. What is the main? What would be the main sutras for the Gaelic tradition?
Well, all of the Mahayana sutras, honestly, all of the Mahayana sutras. There's no one main one. I mean, the Heart Sutra is recited every day. The Heart Sutra, you could say, but it's very short. So, but the thing is that the Tibetans, not just Gaelic, all Tibetan lineages, they focus more on studying the commentaries and, like you're saying, the teachings of these great masters, and less on actually reading sutras directly. So that's just kind of a matter of cultural paradigm that, it's sort of like if you go to a physics department at a university and you want to learn physics, you want to learn quantum mechanics, the first thing you do isn't going to you're not going to go and read Einstein's original paper on relativity and Bohr's papers and Max Planck's papers, right? You're going to read a textbook. You're going to have your teacher explain it to you, and you're going to do the problems. You're going to, learn the math, right? Maybe at some point you'll go back and actually read the original papers by the founders of quantum mechanics or Newton, whatever it is, right? You're not gonna, many physicists probably never do, and you're not gonna do it at the beginning for sure, because the commentaries are, meaning the textbooks, right? They're written for student who's coming in and needs to get a lot of, general knowledge kind of in a short amount of time and learn the vocabulary and learn the big picture, right? So it's similar. It's very similar to that.
I mean, but the thing is that a lot of the people that Tsongkhapa quotes, they're all Indians. In other words, like Atisha and Asanga and what's the other one? Kama
Kamalashita, yeah.
But they're all Indians. So these are the people that wrote the original commentaries on the sutras, right?
Yes.
So and all the people that he's identifying, they're all from the original, I don't know what the Indian.
Right. Right. Well, that's a great observation. So let's go back into the text, and I'm sure we'll catch a few more quotes from Indian texts. But just the last point I'll make about that is just to point out that's a great observation, and that is one of the things that Tsongkhapa is considered to be kind of unique in, or one of the reasons he gained so much renown and popularity is because he put so much focus on those original Indian treatises. And, that was seen as, going, really, he was able to hold the source, right? He was able to hold on to the source while still giving a more modernized explanation of emptiness and kind of unique, you could say, unique ways of explaining emptiness, but still really rooting it in those Indian traditions, so that it kind of, you know gave it that authority. And, that was, I think, very effective. Okay, so let's go into the text for a little bit, since it's not gonna get through it if we spend the whole time with Q&A, but that was really helpful. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so there are those who suppose, okay, this is a total misunderstanding of how to meditate on emptiness. If you have no consciousness at that time, then neither will you have a concentration that cultivates emptiness. Okay? No consciousness means no concentration. On the other hand, if you have consciousness, then you are conscious of something. So you have to accept that there is an object of consciousness in terms of which consciousness is positive. Okay, so this is a little bit more neat in the Tibetan language because just to point out, we have the way that the language works. You have the word for consciousness is this. It's a verbal noun. The word consciousness is actually a verbal noun. So the word conscious or to be conscious is the same word that you say consciousness is the thing being conscious as a verbal noun. And then the object of consciousness is another word that just means an object. It's a general term that just means, something that's knowable, something that exists, basically, something that exists. So you have the object being conscious and the consciouser. Okay, the consciouser and the object being conscious. And that's just it's just one word for conscious, being conscious, and then the second particle, you just switch from pa to ja. And it's this very, very neat, beautiful thing. In English, it kind of turns into something a little bit less neat, but the idea still makes sense. Okay, right? So yeah, conscious, being conscious, something is there to be conscious of, right? Consciousness, an object of consciousness. Okay. If there is an object of consciousness, then precisely that is the object of meditation of that mind, because object of meditation, and object of consciousness have the same meaning. Okay, so we just made that point, right? In that case, they would have to accept that even their method of concentration would apprehend silence. Sorry, change the emphasis here. In that case, they would have to accept that even their method of concentration would apprehend silence. Thus, their approach is not correct. Furthermore, whether something constitutes meditation on emptiness is determined by whether it is meditation founded upon the view that knows the way things are. It is not determined by whether there is any conceptualization vis-a-vis the object. So now some topics really going into why that's not meditation on emptiness and what, how to determine whether something is meditation on emptiness, making the point that non-conceptual meditation does not equate meditation on emptiness. Okay, non-conceptual meditation does not equate meditation on emptiness. So go into more detail about that. But for now, this is the point he's making. And he says right here, this will be demonstrated at length below. Even those who claim to stabilize their minds without an object of meditation must think first, I will keep my attention such that it does not stray toward any object whatsoever, and then keep their attention in that way. After they are focused like that on the mind itself as an object of meditation, they must be certain to fix on this object without straying in any way. Thus, their own experience contradicts their claim that they have no object of meditation. Again, it's just coming back to this kind of common sense. Well, you're sitting there about to meditate. You're thinking to yourself, I'm going to meditate on nothing whatsoever and just keep my attention just on the mind itself, or just this non-dual awareness, or whatever you call it, right? Whatever term, whatever phrase you choose at that time. I'm going to keep my mind in non-dual awareness. You have to make that intention and then keep your mind that way. Well, so then you're experiencing non-dual awareness. So you're experiencing just mind itself, or you're experiencing objectless meditation, whatever you call it. Well, that's the object, right? There's some object there. That's just because you're still experiencing something. Okay. In this way, the class, and this is, by the way, a debate, something that's equally debated today in the West, in philosophy of mind and in consciousness studies. They have very similar methods. In this way, the classic texts on achieving concentration explain that there are many objects of meditation. The purpose. So interesting that he has this sentence here, because to me, I would say that this is pointing out that previous little debate he had there, and trying to show that this is a wrong view. He's not, but here he's giving space for it to still be an object of meditation. right? He's not saying never meditate that way. That's not an object of meditation. He's saying it's not meditation, it's emptiness, right? So just keep that in mind. So again, he's not trying to, you know, kind of completely denigrate other people's way of meditating. He's trying to make it clear what emptiness means. That's a big thing that some topic will tap right into. The purposes of these meditative bases for stabilizing your mind are as explained above, so you should gain expertise in them. Kamala Shiva's Stages of Meditation explains that the object of meditation of serenity is indeterminate. Just meaning that it could be that it's not just one thing for everybody all the time, but there are many different objects of meditation of serenity. And Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment says, it is whatever objects or objects of meditation that are appropriate. So clear, isn't it? But again, Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment is a very short text, right? And that's the whole point, is to kind of just give a general idea, right? Like kind of give an outline, lay it out, and then the later masters, like Tsongkhapa, and even like masters like Longchen Abjampa, right? Even the masters, Kagyu masters, Gampo, right? They also use the features for the path to enlightenment as a basis, and then made further compositions, but kind of using that as the basis. These statements mean that you are not required to stick with one particular object of meditation. They do not show how to define the range of existing objects of meditation. Okay. Now, who should meditate on which objects? Fine. Okay. And who should meditate on which objects? As there are various kinds of people, from those with a preponderance of attachment to those with a preponderance of. Oh wait, let me actually I forgot. Let's have someone else read it. Reading it. Okay, who would like to read? Anybody? No one wants to? I can. But... One. If you want to do. Oh, I can't hear. Is anyone saying something?
Well, I can read.
Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you.
So, who should meditate on which objects? As there are various kinds of people, from those with a preponderance of attachment to those with a preponderance of discursiveness, Asanga's Shravaka levels cites an answer to a question of Rivata. Rivata, if attachment uniquely dominates the behavior of a monk yogi, a practitioner of yoga, then he focuses his mind on the object of meditation of ugliness. If hatred dominates his behavior, he meditates on love. If ignorance dominates his behavior, then he meditates on the dependent arising of this condition. If pride dominates his behavior, he focuses his mind on the differentiation of the constituents. And if discursiveness uniquely dominates his behavior, then he focuses his mind on an awareness of the exhalation and inhalation of the breath. In this way, he focuses his mind on an appropriate object of meditation. Asanga's Shravaka levels also states, in this regard, persons whose behavior is dominated by attachment, hatred, ignorance, pride, or discursiveness should, for a while at the outset, just purify those behaviors by contemplating objects of meditation for purifying behavior. After this, they will see the stability of their minds, and they will ascertain only their objects of meditation. So they should definitely persevere at using their objects of meditation.
One more line.
Okay. Thus, you certainly should work with these objects of meditation. If you are
Okay, that's just I'll take a short break from the reading to just remind everybody, or maybe ask everybody, do you remember what this is referring to here? The objects of meditation for purifying behavior, right? So that was one of those 4 categories, right? Roll up to it. we had again objects, universal object of meditation, object of meditation for purifying your behavior, object of meditation for expertise, object of meditation for purifying. Can you hear that sound or is it blocked out? Okay, okay. Please play out. Okay. Now, and again, that was, there were some questions about this. So he's kind of answering it after the fact. Okay, but that's where he listed, right? Ugliness, love, dependent arising, differentiation of constituents, and the inhalation and constellation. So then down here, from what Neil just read for us, we had this phrase here. Oh, the earlier quote. If ignorance dominates his behavior, then he meditates on the dependent arising of this condition. And that really just means conditionality of dependent arising. Like, I know it's kind of an awkward phrase, dependent arising of what condition? That's kind of a stock phrase you see in the text. And yeah, for some reason it says this condition, but it means conditionality, or the process of things arising from condition, basically. Or just another way of saying dependent arising. Okay. Now maybe that might be enough. Can we finish? Let's just finish with maybe this last one more line and then the quote here. Okay, someone else can maybe take over the reading. No?
Yeah, I could read.
Okay, thank you. Just
If you are a person whose behavior is balanced or one whose afflictions are slight, then it suffices to keep your attention on whichever of the aforementioned objects of meditation you like. It is not necessary to have a particular one. Asanga's Shravaka levels states, those whose behavior is balanced should work at whichever object they like so as to attain just mental stability. This is not for the purpose of purifying behavior. Understand that the same applies to those with slight afflictions. Being dominated by desire, or another of the 5 afflictions, means that in a previous life you were fully involved in that affliction, became accustomed to it, and experienced it frequently, so that now, even if there is a minor object of desire or another of the 5, that affliction arises in a strong and long-lasting form. Balanced behavior means that you were not fully involved in desire and the others in your previous lives. You did not become accustomed to them, and you did not express them frequently. Still, you have not recognized that they are false, and you have suppressed them. So while desire and such are not predominant or of great duration, it is not as though they do not occur. Having slight afflictions means that you are not fully involved and so on in desire or another of the 5 of those 5 in your previous lives, and you do see their disadvantages, etc. Therefore, with respect to objects of desire, such as the major, Therefore, with respect to objects of desire and such that are major, many, or intense, your desire and such arise slowly. While for moderate or minor objects, these afflictions do not arise at all. So when desire or another of those 5 afflictions is predominant, you take a long time to realize stability. With balanced behavior, you do not take an extensively long time. With minor afflictions, you do so very quickly.
wonderful. So this is giving a little bit of a roadmap, and it really is asking us to develop self-awareness. That's really the main thing that we have to get from this, right? If you want to ask, what should I meditate on for shaman? What should be my object of meditation? Well, look inside and see what is your strongest affliction? Or do you have just very few afflictions altogether? And I would wager that very few human beings alive on the planet right now would be able to say that. A few, maybe. I don't know. You know, who haven't like already done extensive practice, right? But anyway, but just be honest with yourself and try to develop self-awareness and see, okay, do I have stronger desire? Is that really whenever I see a beautiful man or woman and am I like obsessed for the next hour about it? And then you meditate on ugliness, right? If every time you're in the car and someone does something against the road etiquette that doesn't use good road etiquette and you slip out and feel like you're burning and hatred and aggression, okay, you need to meditate on love. So just think about for yourself every time you see someone who's got success that you know something that you wanted or a position you wanted or an acknowledgement you wanted and you burn with jealousy. You have to think about what is the object for you. I mean, what is the affliction for you, and then what object of meditation will reduce that affliction first and foremost. Okay. And again, it's giving a description of the people who have balance, then they can just choose whichever they like. And for people who just have weaker afflictions in general, then again, they can choose what they like and they'll be able to achieve Shamatha more quickly. Okay, let's do dedications. I think good time. I have a good time for that. Thank you for reading and for the questions and discussion. It was very interesting and good points people made. Okay, we have dedication. We'll do this chant in English and then we'll do some okay, I still never got the Tibetan ones, did I? But we can do that Lam Rim dedication. Due to this merit, moving soon, attain the awakened state of Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forever. From my two collections, vast as this, that I have amassed in working with effortless practice for a great time, may I become the chief reading Buddha for all those whose minds, wisdom, eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in loving compassion for all my dreams and Jusha. May I find the best of complete created paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by practicing. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings, the points of the path as I like discern. May I uphold Buddhist teachings for a very long. With my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings would spread. No one spread have declined. May I expose this treasure of happiness. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time. By even this created first to enlightenment, completed through the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and make things conducive for practicing the excellent paths never be parted with any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes an effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty and the oceans of prosperity spread. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you to everybody who came and
Thank you, Lo-san.
okay, hope to see you soon. And who came there to Forest of Wisdom. And then I really appreciate you guys if you can water those trees. That would be very, very nice. And thank you for that. And yeah, we should be back I want to say maybe not tomorrow, but the next day. So Sunday it should go on. Unfortunately, Saturday it won't work out. And again, Sunday, Rinpoche can't make it, but we'll still have the class. So why not talk about Bodhisattva together? You know, it'll be meaningful even if Rinpoche is not there. But I really hope he comes back soon and keeps it going. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Osan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Patrice.
Oh.
Yeah.